Keith, one of the characteristics of religion is its incredible diversity, where competing religions really do compete in their doctrines and sometimes in their actual conflicts, has caused great problems in the world. In fact, many atheists would point to the diversity of religion as one of the reasons why God doesn't exist. How do you see diversity of religion in the world?
Well, it's something I would expect, and something that I approve of. I'd expect it because, take philosophy, for example. There are many different philosophies in the world, and that's because human knowledge is so very fragmentary, and people's psychology is so very different, and their languages and cultures are very different. So you'd expect to find different sorts of approach to major issues. Philosophy and religion are both unlike science in that science has a publicly ascertainable, experimentally testable base. So you're going to get some actual progressive knowledge. That's certainly true. But there are other sorts of knowledge than that, which you find in the law, in history, in morality, in philosophy, and in the arts. And I think you can speak about knowledge in those areas. But that sort of knowledge is always going to have diversity as an essential part of it.
So let's look at some different religions. Do you see complementary insights from religion? Certainly I can point out where what they claim about God seem contradictory.
Yeah, that's true, and many religions don't even have a God to believe in, Buddhism being the obvious case. But there's a deeper common core, I think, in religion, and that deeper common core is that, you can't generalize completely, but on the whole, most religions that we know are concerned with a spiritual reality as opposed to a purely physical reality. That is, they're concerned with the realm of consciousness other than human consciousness, which plays some part in the nature of reality. So that seems to me a definite orientation of religion towards consciousness, spirit, and something more than the physical.
So the first thing you would point to discern an apprehension of some consciousness beyond the human as a unifying factor among all religions.
Yes, although even then, you'd have to say some religions stress diversity rather than unity. That is to say, they might have more than one personal God, or they might have a spiritual reality which is not very personal. So you're going to get diversity almost immediately. What I'm saying is common is this stress on consciousness of some sort, spiritual reality. But then it splits up. And what you've got in religion actually is a display, an array, if you like, of every logical possibility of the relationship between consciousness and matter. And I think that's what you've got. And in that array, one of the possibilities is that there is a consciousness which is primary, which gives rise to material things, but which retains that primacy, and that is usually belief in God. Okay, so belief in God would be one possible way of relating spirit to matter. We're saying spirit comes first and it creates matter. But you get other traditions like Buddhism, where that's not true. Spirit and matter coexist. There's no creator. And the point of the religious life is to become liberated from at least the bad aspects of the material universe and to enter into nirvana, a purely conscious spiritual realm of intelligence and bliss. So you can see that these are different ways of exploring the relationship of spirit and matter, but as you quite rightly said, they're complementary. They're not absolutely contradictory. See, a Buddhist wouldn't just say, there's no God. It'd be very unusual Buddhist who just said that. They'd say, I'm not interested in God.
Many from a scientific tradition would look at the diversity, the portrait that you've painted of this canvas, this mosaic of religion, as an example of the futility of trying to discern truth through religion.
Yeah. I think that's because of a very restricted understanding of what truth is. And I think some people think truth is just what you can publicly test and experiment on and establish. And that's not truth at all. There's a much more important sort of truth, which is the truth of personal existence, of the truth of being human, the truth of understanding what motivates people to do things, of understanding them. It's the truth about human life, if you like. You get that in novels. But every novel will present a different perspective. You read Tolstoy, and then you look at the plays of Shakespeare, and you find a presentation of human nature. And it can tell you truth. It can enrich your understanding of the world. But it's not a scientifically testable truth. It's much more fluid. And the thing about this sort of truth is it involves the person who's doing the investigating. Truth is always from a perspective, and there are different perspectives.
But can we make progress? Or is what we have the best we're ever going to get?
No, I think we do make progress. I mean, some novels are worse than others, and some music's worse than other music. And you can say, well, you can distinguish between bad and good. You can distinguish between profound insights and absurdities. And that's what you do if you study music or literature or art. You learn to discern what is profound and deep and worthwhile from what is shoddy and superficial and mere passing fashion.
Do you think that has happened in religion?
Yes, I think it has happened in religion. It's just most people aren't aware of it.
Yeah. Well, one can appreciate art and music that over time the great masters live on and fads disappear. But not clear that that same thing has happened in religion.
Well, you've got, if you said, who are the great spiritual masters in the world, I think most people would come up with Jesus, Buddha, Muhammad. You're going to get a list of people that seem to be outstanding spiritual figures. And then if you go to the people who write about things, again, you get a fairly agreed classical list. You get Thomas Aquinas, you get Anselm, and you get Nagarjuna in the Buddhist tradition, Shankara and Ramanuja. There are names, and you say these people represent the height of reflection in these subjects. The tragedy in religion is that people tend to think that your opinion is as good as mine. Okay. In your case, it is. But I mean, on the whole, people think anybody's opinion is as good as anybody's opinion. Do you see what I mean? There are no standards. You just think, this is the way I see it, and that's the
Some
truth.
people think that's an asset.
But it's clearly not. I mean, I think religion is as difficult to understand as physics is. The pity of it is that a lot of people who are very, very bad at understanding religious traditions think that they've got the truth about them, when all they have to do is read the traditions, but they won't do that. So there is a problem in religion. I mean, in physics, you've got a nice little society which will exclude people who are, cranks. But there are plenty of cranks in physics. And I was reassured to learn from a colleague of mine who's a professor of physics that he gets letters every week from people who've disproved Einstein's theory of relativity. Well, they're obviously cranks. He doesn't even read them.
Perpetual motion machines.
Perpetual motion machines. Well, but in religion,
nobody pays attention to that. But in religion, those kinds of people have followings, significant.
Yeah, that's right. So the problem in religion is making a distinction between just the crazy and that which has been tested and tried and refined through intellectual progress, which has been made.
Now,
so
some would argue in religion that every established religion started out as a crazy.
That's possible. I wouldn't deny that, really. Just as chemistry started out, with alchemy. Mm-hmm. So why not? I think it's the same religion. Starts crude, and in places it gets better. But a discerning person can find out, just by studying the traditions, that some are really more intrinsically worthwhile. Now, the interesting thing is this, that the people who are, by general educated agreement, the classical writers, like Aquinas, like Shankara, like Ramanuja, are all more closely united to each other than they are to people in their own tradition who've never read them. Okay. So there is a sort of, I mean, I don't want to be elitist terribly about this, but you just have to say some people just know more about reflective religion than others, and there is such a thing as a tradition. And when you look at that, the diversity becomes much more clearly a matter of complementarity. Can I give you an example of this? That Maimonides, the great, surely everybody would agree, one of the great Jewish thinkers of all time, said that actually if anybody says God is powerful and good, let him be thrown out of the synagogue. That's a pretty remarkable thing to say. And the reason was Maimonides' doctrine that actually we don't know anything about God, that everything positive we say about God is false. Mm-hmm. Now that measure of agnosticism about God means that he can't be very far away from somebody in a different tradition who admits to a similar agnosticism.
It's a way of reverence, in a sense.
It's a way of reverence.
We can't appreciate the grandeur of God, so we have to sort of not say anything. I would say it's a way of worship almost.
That's true. That's exactly true. But supposing you've got a Jew and a Christian talking, and the Jew says, I don't know anything about God, and then the Christian says, I don't know anything about God either. Well, they're agreeing with each other. So how could they disagree? Right? They could disagree by saying, I approach the unknowable by using these metaphors and symbols.